Have you ever had this experience? You meet someone for coffee, spend an hour talking, and when you leave, you feel completely drained, as if someone had extracted the battery from your body and stomped on it. The curious thing is that during the conversation, nothing particularly bad happened. No arguments or conflicts, just a normal interaction that somehow leaves you exhausted to the core. Now contrast that with other people in your life. Those few who, even after hours of intense conversation, make you feel full of energy, inspired, and more alive than before. It's as if they connect you to a cosmic source of energy instead of draining it. What explains this profound difference? And how do people affect our energy levels? This question fascinated one of the greatest psychological thinkers in history. Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, spent decades exploring the hidden dynamics of the human psyche, including the mysterious ways energy flows between people during their interactions. Jung didn't see it simply as a matter of personality types or social skills. He believed something much deeper was happening, something rooted in our unconscious and the complex psychological forces that shape our relationships. Today, we will delve into Jung's ideas to understand why some people drain you while others recharge you, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Jung's perspective on energy-draining people. To understand Jung's perspective on energy-draining people, we must first understand his concept of psychic energy, which he called libido. When most people hear the word libido, they think of Freud and sexual energy, but Jung greatly expanded this concept. For him, libido was not just sexual energy. It was the life force that animates our entire psyche. It is the fundamental energy that drives our thoughts, emotions, creativity, and our connections with others. Jung saw this energy as something that constantly flows through our psyche, moving between consciousness and the unconscious, driving our mental processes in the same way that blood nourishes our physical body. When this energy is blocked, depleted, or misdirected, psychological problems arise. One of Jung's most profound ideas was recognizing that relationships function as energy exchanges. Every interaction involves a transfer of this psychic energy between people. Some exchanges are balanced and mutually beneficial. Both parties feel recharged afterward. Others, however, are dramatically unbalanced. One person leaves revitalized while the other feels completely drained. Think about your own relationships. Who leaves you feeling renewed and who leaves you feeling exhausted? According to Jung, these sensations are not mere subjective impressions. They reflect real psychological processes occurring beneath the surface of your interactions. But what exactly happens during these energy-draining encounters? What psychological mechanisms explain why some people seem to absorb all your vitality? Key psychological mechanisms. Jung identified several fundamental psychological mechanisms that explain why certain interactions drain so much energy. Projection. Jung believed that we all have aspects of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge, parts of our personality that we find uncomfortable, embarrassing, or threatening. Instead of facing these elements, we unconsciously project them onto others. People who drain energy often engage in massive projection. They refuse to own their negative emotions, insecurities, or problems, and instead unconsciously transfer them to those around them. When you interact with such a person, you're not only dealing with them, but also with all the unrecognized psychological material they carry with them. No wonder you feel exhausted. Imagine a colleague who, deeply insecure about their competencies, refuses to acknowledge that feeling. Instead of accepting their insecurity, they constantly criticize your work, question your decisions, and undermine your confidence. What is really happening is that they are projecting their own fears onto you and making you carry that emotional weight they refuse to bear. Emotional contagion. Emotions are transmitted between people like viruses. When someone is full of anxiety, resentment, or fear, these emotions radiate and infect the psychological space around them. This is not just a poetic metaphor. Research in neuropsychology has identified mirror neurons that make us unconsciously mimic and assimilate the emotional states of those around us. If you spend time with someone dominated by negative emotions, your brain literally starts to mirror their neural patterns. Your nervous system begins to operate as if you were experiencing those negative emotions yourself. The shadow. Perhaps Jung's most powerful explanation for energy depletion is his concept of the shadow. The shadow is the term Jung used to refer to the repressed and denied aspects of ourselves, those parts of our personality that we refuse to acknowledge. It contains qualities that don't fit with our unconscious self-image. If you consider yourself a kind person, your shadow may contain your capacity for cruelty. If you identify as rational, your shadow harbors your irrational impulses. When someone has not integrated their shadow, that is, when they refuse to accept these disowned aspects of themselves, they unconsciously act in ways that drain others. For example, someone who denies their own anger might not express it openly, but instead resort to passive-aggressive behaviors, create drama, or subtly undermine others. Being around such a person becomes exhausting because you constantly have to respond to both their conscious communication and the unconscious material of their shadow that seeps into the interaction. As Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The same applies to relationships. Until people become aware of their unconscious patterns, these patterns will direct their interactions and drain those around them. Archetypes of energy-draining personalities. From Jung's ideas, we can identify several archetypes of people who drain energy. You might recognize some of these figures in your own life. The victim. This person has adopted helplessness as part of their identity. Nothing is ever their fault or responsibility. They constantly share their problems, but reject solutions, seeking sympathy instead of change. The victim drains your energy by dragging you into endless cycles of rescue and enabling without ever taking responsibility for their own well-being. According to Jung, the victim has rejected their own inner strength and capacity for change, projecting that rejected strength onto others and then resenting those who possess what they deny in themselves. The narcissist. Perhaps the most notorious energy vampire, the narcissist demands constant attention, validation, and emotional labor. Conversations always revolve around them. They need admiration but rarely offer genuine reciprocity. Initially, they may seem charming, but relationships with them become increasingly one-sided in terms of energy exchange. From a Jungian perspective, the narcissist has not developed a true relationship with their own inner world. Instead, they use others as mirrors to reflect their grandiose self-image, thus draining the energy of everyone around them in their desperate quest for external validation. The martyr. The martyr constantly sacrifices themselves for others, but uses these sacrifices as currency to generate guilt and obligation. "I've done so much for you" becomes their unspoken slogan. The martyr drains your energy by creating impossible debts to repay, turning what seems like generosity into subtle emotional manipulation. From Jung's point of view, the martyr has rejected their own needs and desires, projecting them onto others and then resenting those who possess what they deny in themselves. The manipulator. The manipulator employs subtle tactics like guilt, fear, or obligation to control the emotions of others. They are masters at making you feel responsible for their feelings. Interactions with a manipulator leave you confused, insecure, and drained, as you constantly have to navigate hidden agendas instead of engaging in authentic communication. Jung would see the manipulator as someone who is denied their own vulnerability, projecting their fears onto others to control their emotions. The energy vampire. Lastly, there is the category that modern popular psychology calls the energy vampire, people who unconsciously suck the vitality from those around them. They may monopolize conversations, dramatize minor issues, create crises, or simply fill the environment with a nervous and fragmented energy, leaving everyone feeling drained by the end of the encounter. What all these people have in common is that their energy exchange is fundamentally unbalanced. They take much more than they give, often without being aware of it. Why do these people keep appearing in your life? This is a complex question, one that Jung would surely have pondered. Why do these energy-draining people keep appearing in your life? Jung believed that our external relationships reflect our internal psychological state. If certain patterns repeatedly occur in your relationships, it's not just bad luck, it's something in your own psyche that attracts or allows these dynamics. Unresolved emotional wounds. Often, unhealed emotional wounds attract people who reactivate them. If you grew up with emotionally unavailable parents, you might unconsciously be drawn to partners who are also emotionally distant. The psyche has the strange tendency to recreate its traumas in an unconscious attempt to heal them. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The people who most effectively drain you probably activate your deepest unhealed wounds, the need to please and weak boundaries. If you have difficulty saying no, setting boundaries, or prioritizing your own needs, you are essentially sending a signal that says, "Drain my energy, I will allow it." Jung emphasized the importance of individuation, the process of becoming a complete and differentiated being. Without this sense of self, boundaries weaken, and others can easily exploit your emotional resources. Lack of self-awareness. A lack of self-awareness makes you vulnerable to energy-draining relationships. If you don't recognize your own patterns and triggers, you can't protect yourself from those who activate them. You will continue to fall into the same dynamics, wondering why you feel so drained without seeing your own role in that pattern. Your own shadow. Perhaps on the deepest level, Jung would point to your own shadow. Often, what drains us most about others is a reflection of something we have rejected in ourselves. The qualities that irritate us most in others are often the same ones we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. For example, if someone's excessive dependency drains you, ask yourself if you have rejected your own needs and vulnerability. If someone's anger drains you, examine your relationship with the healthy expression of your own anger and assertiveness. As Jung wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Energy-draining relationships offer a painful but potentially transformative opportunity to recognize the rejected parts of yourself. Practical strategies to protect yourself. Now comes the practical question. How can you protect yourself from people and relationships that drain your energy? Jung's psychology offers several powerful strategies. Develop greater self-awareness. Pay attention to how you feel after each interaction. Who are the people that consistently leave you feeling drained? What specific behaviors trigger that exhaustion? What patterns do you recognize in the different relationships that drain you? Keep a journal where you note these observations and track your energy levels throughout the day. Notice what Jung called complexes, those emotional flashpoints that, when activated, cause a disproportionate loss of energy. Set clear boundaries. Jung believed that proper psychological development requires building a strong self, that is, a healthy self-image with defined boundaries. Without these boundaries, your psychic energy dissipates into those who demand it. It's essential to learn to say no without feeling guilty. Equally important is recognizing when someone is crossing your personal boundaries. Use phrases like, "I can't take care of that right now." "I need to think about it before deciding," or simply, "That doesn't work for me." These expressions will help protect your energy from inappropriate demands. Actively manage your energy. Jung was fascinated by Eastern practices like meditation, which he saw as techniques for directing and conserving psychic energy. Develop your own daily rituals to recharge your energy. Meditation to clear psychic burdens and reorient your energy. Spending time in nature to reconnect with primordial regenerative forces. Creative expression to channel your energy into actions that nurture your life. Physical activity to prevent energetic stagnation. And intentionally spending time with people who recharge you instead of draining you. Work on your shadow. As Jung emphasized, the parts of us that we reject do not disappear. They operate from the unconscious and often attract precisely those energy-draining relationships you try to avoid. Shadow work involves honestly confronting those qualities you don't want to accept in yourself. What traits bother you most in others? What aspects of yourself do you try to hide? What emotions do you consider unacceptable? By recognizing and integrating these denied parts, you become less reactive to them in others. You will develop what Jung called integrity, not perfection, but the ability to encompass the full spectrum of human qualities without being dominated by them. As you heal your relationship with your own shadow, you will be less vulnerable to energy drains, recognize projection more easily, set boundaries more effectively, and naturally attract balanced and mutually enriching relationships. Final reflections. As we have seen, energy drainage in relationships is not just a subjective feeling. It reflects real psychological processes identified by Jung decades ago. When someone leaves you feeling drained, powerful unconscious mechanisms are at play: projection, emotional contagion, and shadow dynamics. We have identified the archetypes of energy-draining personalities you might encounter: the victim, the narcissist, the martyr, the manipulator, and the energy vampire. Each drains energy in different ways, but all share a fundamentally unbalanced energy exchange. We have also looked inward to understand why we attract or allow these exhausting relationships. Unhealed emotional wounds, weak boundaries, lack of self-awareness, and denied aspects of our shadow play a crucial role in maintaining these patterns. Most importantly, we have explored practical strategies to protect yourself. Develop your self-awareness, set clear boundaries, actively manage your energy, and do the inner work necessary, what Jung called individuation, the path to psychological wholeness. Remember, energy exchange occurs in all relationships, but in the long run, it should be relatively balanced. If you constantly feel drained after seeing someone, your body and mind are sending you important signals. Don't ignore them. As Jung said, who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes. By becoming more aware of the unconscious dynamics in your relationships, you gain the power to transform them. You can choose relationships that nurture instead of drain, recognize projection and emotional manipulation for what they are, and set boundaries that protect your vital energy. I would love to hear about your experiences with energy-draining people and learn what strategies have helped you deal with them. Have you encountered any of the described archetypes? What techniques have been most effective for you in protecting your energy? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember, your energy is valuable. You have every right to protect it, direct it, and share it only with those who respect its value. As Jung would say, it is not only your right, but also your responsibility on the path to becoming your complete self.